Welcome to the Adaptation Planning and Practices online training brought to you by the USDA Northern Forests Climate Hub and Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science. This is step 3, evaluating management objectives given projected impacts and vulnerabilities. As a reminder, this training guides participants through the Adaptation Workbook, a resource created by and supported by the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science and USDA Climate Hubs. The Adaptation Workbook is a process designed to help managers integrate climate change considerations into natural resource planning. Each step is designed for custom inputs that relies on your expert judgment and evaluation. When completed, the Adaptation Workbook can provide a clear plan and project record that reflects each project's unique goals and values. Throughout this training, we will introduce each step of the process to you and work through them together. Use this training to learn about the process and to think critically about each step. And afterwards, we hope you'll feel empowered to use these same steps for future projects and share them with colleagues to integrate into their work too. This week, we're tackling step 3, evaluating management objectives given projected impacts and vulnerabilities. In this step, we bring together the management goals and objectives you identified in step 1 and the climate impacts you identified in step 2 to think about how the climate change will affect your management goals and objectives. In this step, you will weigh the challenges and opportunities that climate change presents and then determine the feasibility of meeting your management objectives under current management or business as usual. In earlier steps, you first identified your management goals and objectives for your project area, step 1, and then assessed climate change impacts and vulnerabilities for your project site, step 2. In this step, step 3, you will evaluate the ways in which climate change may make it easier or harder to achieve each management objective. You will also evaluate the feasibility of meeting your management objectives under current management and consider whether they should be altered or refined to better account for anticipated climate change impacts. As we move through this step, the key questions are: what management challenges or opportunities might occur? Can current management meet management goals, or do our goals need to change? What specific challenges and opportunities exist for any impacted communities you identified in step 2? And again, do our goals need to change? For some folks, step 3 can feel very similar to step 2, but they are distinctly different. Let's take a closer look at how these steps work together. Step 2 is about how climate change affects the place where you are working. How might climate change impacts affect this area? How vulnerable is this site? Can it cope or adapt to these changes? This step requires evaluation of site level characteristics like slope and aspect, tree canopy cover, understory composition, soil properties, and overall health. In step 3, we consider how those site level impacts affect our ability to achieve our management goals and objectives, whether climate change creates additional challenges or if there are some climate-related opportunities too. In essence, can we set out to do what we meant to do using current management options? So let's get started. First, you will identify challenges to meeting management objectives, listing the ways in which climate change impacts and vulnerabilities may make it more difficult to achieve each objective that you've identified in step number 1. The aim here is to focus on concerns related to ecological or environmental challenges rather than other considerations such as financial or social, since there will be a place for these considerations later in this step. Let's take a look at a few examples drawn from past projects. Here you can see a list of objectives in the first column and climate-related challenges in the second column. I'll focus on the objective on line number 2, improve breeding habitat for forest interior birds. The challenge identified for that objective references projected declines in conifer species, which reduces the conifer cover component of bird habitat. You can see then for each of the objectives shown here, there is at least one corresponding challenge, but in reality, you will likely identify 2 to 3 challenges for each objective. Next, we'll focus on climate-related opportunities to meeting management objectives by listing the ways in which climate change may make it easier to achieve a management objective or creates new management or conservation opportunities. For example, increases in small or medium scale disturbances may help increase structural complexity within a standard landscape, which may be beneficial for some goals and objectives. So again here, let's focus on concerns related to ecological and environmental challenges. Let's return to the previous example with a new column describing opportunities. The second row, improving breeding habitat for forest interior birds, now has an opportunity described as climate-related disturbances such as storm damage can help increase coarse woody material. The next item to consider is how the challenges and opportunities that you have identified may affect the feasibility of meeting your management objectives using current or business as usual management options. So for each objective, we're kind of weighing opportunities against challenges. Are there more challenges than opportunities, or do the opportunities outweigh the risks? And then we can rate feasibility as high, moderate, or low. An objective might have high feasibility if the identified opportunities outweigh the challenges and if existing management options are adequate to address the challenges. An objective may have moderate feasibility if challenges are weighted heavier, but they can still be addressed by using existing management options, even if they require additional resources or perhaps extra effort. Low feasibility objectives are those with substantial challenges that existing management options are not sufficient to overcome. So as you think about feasibility, it can also be helpful to rate feasibility differently over the short term versus the longer term, depending on the resource in question. Returning to our example in row 2, you can see now the feasibility ranking for our objective. Although the challenge is a decline in the conifer cover, increases in structural components create valuable opportunities. So in this case, the feasibility was rated high. If we look at another objective that was rated with low feasibility, for example, to provide sufficient protection and habitat for the eastern box turtle, there are opportunities to retain more woody material on site due to climate change related disturbances. However, the challenges are more serious. Drier conditions, fluctuating water levels, and reduced winter snowpack are driving hydrologic changes that cannot be addressed through current management options. If some of your management objectives have low feasibility, or if they no longer seem practical under climate change, such as managing for a species that is already declining and expected to decline under climate change, you may reconsider your management objectives or change your broader management goals. Lastly, in this step, you can record other considerations. This is where you can list any social, financial, or other factors that might affect your decision to pursue your management objectives. Common considerations include requirements under a broader plan or strategy, threatened, endangered, or species of conservation concern, cost of implementation or potential funding sources, and alignment with ongoing initiatives or partner organizations. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice considerations are also revisited here. In step 3, we evaluate how these vulnerable or underserved communities we identified in step 1 can be impacted within our project area, how they might be disproportionately impacted by climate change, as well as how they might be positioned to inform or support climate-related opportunities. To support your thinking in this step, we've pulled together a few resources that provide some background on these topics, though there are many resources and tools out there that may be more relevant to your project or to your questions. If you need a place to start, you can read the National Climate Assessment, Chapter 16 on Tribes and Indigenous Peoples, and Chapter 20 on Social Systems and Justice. You can also use the Climate and Economic Justice screening tool, which has an interactive map and uses data sets that are indicators of burden over 8 categories that include climate change, energy, health, housing, legacy, pollution, transportation, water and wastewater, and workforce development. The tool uses all of this information to identify communities that are experiencing these burdens. And we can use this information as a first step in identifying communities before engaging with the local issues, the communities, and the collaborators. So returning to our example on breeding bird habitat, under other considerations for this objective, we identified that there is existing funding through forest management that can help support the creation of coarse woody material. In the third example, we have an objective to increase tree canopy cover in under-resourced neighborhoods, which also have disproportionate challenges related to the urban heat island effect. Opportunities here exist to identify resilient tree species that could be better maintained as street trees and help cool these areas down. So then under the other considerations category, we can include the role of residents in those neighborhoods that could support tree planting in their own yards. So you can see there's a wide variety of other considerations, social, financial, legal, and you can really use this place in the workbook to capture the most relevant connections for your project. Climate change may make some management goals and objectives simply more difficult to achieve in the future. And there may be situations in which they need to be altered or refined to better account for anticipated climate change impacts. After completing step 3, you should have a better idea about whether your management objectives are feasible, given the management options that are available to you. And you may have also identified social, economic, or other considerations that affect your decision to pursue certain management objectives anyway. So before we're completed with step 3, we can check in with yourself and ask, are you going to continue with the goals and objectives you have identified? If any of the objectives are rated as low feasibility, or if they no longer seem relevant under climate change, then you may want to realign your management objectives or your broader management goals at this time and return to step 1 to revise them. You can use all of the information that you've gathered up to this point to create goals and objectives that are more likely to succeed given the projected impacts from climate change. You don't need to redo step 2, but you can update your objectives in step number 3 before moving on to step 4. Or if you've determined that your management objectives are pretty solid under a changing climate, you have high or moderate feasibility of meeting them, then you can simply proceed to step 4 to explore your adaptation options. And that concludes description of step 3 of the Adaptation Workbook for the Adaptation Planning and Practices training. Please contact us for more information.